Good morning, afternoon, and evening, my fellow chipmunks. This is Chipmunk Speaks trademark Elora G, and I am here to talk to you about the following episode #001 Finding the Words to Say When There Are None to Say at All, Part 2 of many more to come. Last time, we talked with Eucharistic Painter 007, and they had great insight on how being with family should be a time where we get together and restore that familial bond despite all the things we may have gone through within our lifetimes. They further talked about how they felt they were being manipulated by their own family to provide support for their literally ungrateful sibling, and manipulated by their own parents to provide support for their family without being able to be successful in life on their own means. Today's episode is going to delve a little deeper into those questions to give a sense of further acknowledgement of the deeper conversational rhetoric. In this video, I hope to answer the lingering emotions for providing self-care in times when there is none within your own families. In further detail for question 1's response, side note, watch #001 Family Matters, Part 1 for better insight to the ongoing conversation. Let's get back to the video. Some coping mechanisms that would further help others jumpstart their own self-care is to firstly put your own hand out and ask for support from others. From the beginning of time, as humans, we've learned that we work better as a community rather than on our own. If we were to look at the early civilization period, we look back at the bones of a member who had a broken femur and was nursed back to health, and the fracture completely healed, as seen in Yale's Dr. Div and Jeffrey Oakes' 2013 article. In this instance, we can come to an understanding about this quote from the book titled The Best Care Possible, A Physician's Quest to Transform Care Through the End of Life by Avery, 2012, as follows, quote unquote, to cure sometimes, to relieve often, to comfort always. That is one way in which we have physically helped each other as the people of our own individual cultures and ethnicities. In some ways, we have overcome many times when we were in the midst of war in times of peace, hence the name Pax Romana, the great time of peace within what was known as the Roman Empire from Britain to Constantinople, otherwise known as Istanbul, Turkey, in the present world of today. The early sense of nuclear family consisted of the main immediate family and sometimes included the generation before, i.e., grandparents, if they lived long enough. In those days, the main family consisted of the two parents, the children, etc. But that was the Western world. In the East, countries such as China were comprised of the greater family living in arrangements where the nuclear family lived within the family home or clan, hence the name of neighborhoods being named after the families that lived in the same house or within the confines of the walled off and protected family grounds. What I'm trying to say is What I'm trying to reiterate is that in some way or fashion, we've lost touch with what the nuclear family looks like within the confines of today's society and as a product of generational trauma as found in the now popular but impossible to keep up with single parent homes. Some people have had the default nuclear family, others being the product of a broken family system created by its own confines within the times of war. The parents, both being breadwinners of the home, and sometimes broken due to certain circumstances within that society, in today's world, have no time to be personally with their own children, and as such, the children are being raised by the care of their grandparents, guardians, and in some instances, outside of the home altogether by godparents. What may seem to the child as forever moving about and not having stability within the home, oftentimes are skewed to the idea that this is the default way in which they are supposed to live, when in actuality, they don't even know the half of what they could actually have as far as physical, emotional, and social support goes. As the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. It is rather a positive outlook to instill a sense of community within the child. Otherwise, within the village, if they don't take care of its next generation, we lose ourselves within other things that narrow our vision to what is available around us. The children in those societies get to a point in which their own childhood, they believe eventually that they never had support to begin with. The ideal middle class family, with the dog or cat as seen in movies, seem unattainable and far from reach, or rather, impossible. Although psychology is a new experimental science, there can be many ways in which the DSM 5 can describe the very fabric in which children's figurative quilt pattern may have created the personality that is theirs and only theirs through the broader terms of BPD, bipolar disorder, or DID, dissociative identity disorder. In this way, others can see for themselves the grand presence trauma can impact a child. When the parent tries to control your every move, the colloquial term would be the helicopter parent, always watching your every move without necessarily providing that emotional and moral support that the child needs. The authoritative parent versus the authoritarian versus the neglectful, and lastly, versus permissive parent. Each style is unique in their own way, but each has their own cons. We will get to those types of parenting styles in part 3. In question 2, Eucharistic Painter 007 asked, what would be the best way to get families to schedule a family mealtime instead of eating at separate times? To give some insight on this question, I believe we must first get to the source of how this question may have come to be. It looks like in EP007's family, they don't get to sit down with each other. Very rarely they do, only during holidays, even if that. I hope to follow up with a film analysis on the 2016 film titled Fences, starring Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. With this film, I would like to explore the differences, the different sides in this family, and talk about the parenting styles as seen in the film. Chipmunks, that's your insider mission. Watch this film, then establish more family questions later on this month for next month's podcast. After watching the film, send some more questions that you'd like answered in the next 003 Family Matters Part 3 video. I hope to see my chipmunks then. Here's a citation as follows, APA style, of course. Yale Div School, 2013, October 8th. A 15,000-year-old bone in the fall 2013 issue of Reflections, Yale Divinity School. https://divinity.yale.edu/15,000-year-old-bone-and-issue-reflections. End of citation. Alrighty, my fellow chipmunks, thank you for viewing this podcast, and continue your support by following on Patreon and other platforms for more content. If you feel like you are alone in this world, you are not. Please call the suicide hotline 988 if you feel like you need help. Locate your local mental health clinic and seek help. Like I said, you are not alone. We are here for you. Just reach out your hand. Once again, thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I hope that next time you hear me again, and I hope you have a good night, morning, evening, afternoon. Goodbye, my fellow chipmunks.